All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Interoperability Workgroup session. Glad to have so many of you here to join us. Before we get into any of it, because this is an actual workgroup meeting, we're going to share some content and actually put you to work a little bit. We do have our antitrust policy that we want to share with everybody. RESO strives to increase competition in the marketplace and won't be a forum for anti-competitive conduct. This antitrust policy governs the activities of RESO and all of its members, including everyone in this room. A link to the policy was sent along with meeting agenda, and always consult RESO's counsel if you have questions about the policy. I don't know if he's actually in here, so you'll have to hunt him down, but you can find him if you need to. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about interoperability and who we are and what we're all about. So on the agenda today, first question first, can you raise your hand if you've attended an interoperability workgroup meeting on Zoom? Good, I got a couple people in here that have joined us. Excellent. We've got a nice, solid group that's been steadily growing as we've been taking on new projects. But as you can tell by the people not raising their hands, there's a lot of you who haven't had the pleasure of joining Catharine and myself on our monthly meetings. We want to make sure that we take this opportunity to talk to you about what we've done and also what we want to do. And hopefully we can recruit a few more of you to join us and talk through these conversations as we go through it. So we'll talk about interoperability, what we're working on, and then hopefully you'll give us some ideas about what we can do next. So I'm Chris Haran. My day job is at MRED. I've been the chair for the Interoperability Workgroup since we started it about 6 years ago now at this point. It originally started with transaction management, and we've definitely branched out a little bit, but RESO is near and dear to our heart at MRED, and we are very happy to be involved up and down all the work groups, not just interoperability. And I'm joined by Catharine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catharine MacIntosh. I'm the founder and CEO of Listed. And like Chris, RESO is very dear to my heart. Our company joined RESO before we even had a product back in 2017. And so it's been a real thrill to be part of the Interoperability Committee workgroup. We are a front end of choice real estate search platform for consumers to use through organized real estate in collaboration with their agent.
Great. So now that you know us, what is our mission with interoperability at RESO? There's a few questions, and we have a nice fancy marketing mission statement that we have written out that you can see on our workspace page. But really, we're looking at a few different questions. And the biggest one is, are there systems for agents and brokerages, and are they talking to each other? And that's really what interoperability comes down to at its core, is can we get that data to be passed back and forth between similar systems? What we like to do in interoperability is how can we apply existing standards? If there's a need for a new standard, like for transaction management or for showings that we've done in the past, we'll create those. But more often than not, we're taking a look at what's already out there and saying, how can we apply this? How can we make more use of this? Whether that's data dictionary fields or different RCPs, that's a lot of what we try and do is we don't want to create a bunch of brand new. We want to find better ways to use what already exists. And we also want to talk through implementation. We're not transport, so we don't get too deep into it, but we do want to come up with ideas about how we can implement in different ways those standards, those fields, those ideas. So we're always trying to workshop, we built it for this purpose, but what are the other purposes that it potentially could be used for? And all of that's done in increasing the spirit of interoperability and having that cooperation that we do as brokerages and agents within MLSs happen with vendors that are servicing that same space too. So we're always trying to highlight those who are doing it well and really promote people who are using that spirit of interoperability. So that's the mission in the form of questions. But our true mission, to speak the Texas lingo, is we want to avoid being a work group that's all hat, no cattle. How many people have heard that phrase? Okay, so if you don't know what that means, all hat, no cattle is what you'd use to describe someone who's a big talker with nothing to show for it. That's what we don't want to be in our work group. Like, we do want to have, even if it's incremental progress, we want to get things done. And actually, I do have a Larry the Cable Guy image later, so unfortunately Al beat me to the punch there, but that is a big part of what we're trying to do with these work groups is we want to make sure we're actually contributing and getting things done and showing that to the people who give us the time to volunteer and show up at that work group, that we're taking their ideas and making them come true. So we do want to talk about what we have got done and what we are working on. And this will be the little bit of the recruiting pitch if any of this interests you. But we've been doing a lot of work actually with payloads. There hasn't been a formal payloads group for a couple of years. But we're looking at the certification tools that Josh and team had rolled out. And there's that handy little drop-down filter for IDX. And if you click on that, you can see all the fields that you would use for an IDX payload to populate your website. And we started talking about, in our group, could there be other use cases for that? And if you're a vendor in a specific space, do you really need to download and use the entire data dictionary? Or could we give you a better roadmap on what fields might be useful for your product? So we started bringing in ideas for that and some subject matter experts. And we've got two that we've got pretty much wrapped up that are going forward. And we'll talk about those on the next slide. But the idea there was, let's see if we can help make it a little bit easier to digest everything that RESO's got and say, these are things you probably want to take a look at outside of just the property resource, going across all of our resources that might help you in building your specific payload. At the same time, that's the really fun spreadsheet work, which I'm sure many of our group loves. But then Catherine's also been working on stories for a best practice guide for RESO. And I always like what Catherine told me when she came into it, she was really looking for how can this help my business and how do I get started, which is a similar question that I had for the MLS and how can we use that to help our business go. Mm-hmm. And a couple conferences ago, we did share some stories about that. But that ultimately, in talking with RESO staff, seemed like a good idea of could we capture these stories and help market the standards and get those ideas into more of a white paper type format. So we've been creating stories at the same time we're doing this payload tagging. So we're doing a technical piece of saying, here's the fields you should use, but then we're also doing the marketing piece of here's why you should use them in that way. So those two have been going kind of hand in hand for our last several meetings. And then obviously we have a bunch of feedback from our work group and from outside the work group. We work really well with R&D on cases that they are putting together. Anything that comes from broker advisory that could be interesting, that fits our mandate. We don't want to work on that, but we want to uncover how those current standards, again, can be implemented to improve the interoperability between systems. And we're really researching all business cases, and that'll be part of what we do at the end of the day today is start building up more of that business case backlog for us. So we did talk about that we've switched in the last several meetings to do more of this payload tagging and best practices exercise. There's actually two that have already been done over the last 4 meetings. The first one was actually really interesting. It came out of the RESO conference in the spring. We had a roundtable session, which hopefully you're all going to be attending the roundtables in the morning because there's some really great ideas that come out of that. Believe it or not, first thing in the morning after 2 days at a conference, you still get good ideas. But one of those that came up was about association management systems and what RESO could do to help with that. And what we decided is, well, maybe we just need to make it easier for anyone who's building an AMS platform or interacting with an AMS platform to understand what fields could go back and forth. So that's where that really became an idea. We went through and we took a look at all the different resources and said, look, this could be used for an association management vendor. This might not be used for association management systems. And then we also wrote up those best practices at the same time on some different ways you could interact with association management data and could use it, whether it's going into that system or out of that system. So it was really cool to have that kind of go side by side. And then the one we're just wrapping up is actually offer management. That was second up on our list. So what does that look like and where can you find out more? So this is a quick promo for our Confluence page. So if you're a member here, you can sign in, go to the Interoperability Workspace. We've got the link up there on the screen. But here is where we've got all of these different cases set. So if you wanted to see this and dive into it in more detail, we've got our payload tagging worksheet, which I'll show a sample of that next. We've got all of our use cases that we've been talking about and writing up. And then you can see sort of our best practices guide template that we've been using to fill out and give information to RESO staff to help eventually build that product. So this is the spreadsheet that I mentioned before with the payload samples. And it's really simple. We've got columns C, D, and E, if you can see that there, where we say the payloads for association management system, offer management, and then the already existing IDX. And this is the really glamorous side of the job. When we fill this out, we literally just go through line by line and say, does this field make sense? And we have debates about it, and it's really good open conversation. And at the end of it, we go through every single resource, and we say what could be used, what couldn't be used. And then we'll package that all up, and we submit it to Data Dictionary. And then they'll eventually vote on it. And because it's not part of any major changes, they can continually just add that to the dictionary, because these are mays, not musts. So it's actually really, really easy to add this in once it gets approved by Data Dictionary in their work group and move it along. So that's the 3 columns we've got going now. And then we have the best practices guide blueprint. So these are some of the questions that we ask. And this is just really open conversation as well. And what we do is we say, what data is getting passed back and forth, what data could be passed back and forth, who's using that data, who's interacting with it, what could be new uses of that. A lot of different questions will go back and forth to talk through that and build that up. And we really are trying to come up with unique and creative ways where you don't have to use everything, but you can use parts of it, so you can at least get started. So that's where I said, like, every meeting, we do try and kind of divide it up a little bit between, here's our major spreadsheet work, but then here's some more like ideation, have a little bit more fun. So it's a good opportunity, whether you're a technical person or more on the business side of things, like our work group does have a little bit of something for everybody, because we are going down those two paths at the same time. So how does that process work? And if you want to get involved, how will you help with that? So first things first, we get the use case submitted. Someone says, I really want a payload tagging for this so I understand what fields I need to use. So that comes to us, and then we just pull up that spreadsheet and we review all the resources. Obviously, property is the largest one, but it's been really interesting because we've actually spent a fair amount of time in the member resource, looking at member and office information, especially with some of our initial things that have come through. So it'll be very interesting in just listening to the panel before us talk about unique IDs. That comes up a lot in our conversations here. So hopefully we can come up with some ideas to help whatever work group ends up working on that. So we review those resources, and we put in the initial tags, and then, like I said, we spend the work group meeting, we just talk through it and say, okay, we're putting it here, here, and here. We're not putting it here, and here's why. And then we get consensus before we move on. So we want the entire group to agree as much as we can, like, this is the draft that we're putting out there. Now, the good news is we can always go back and add more or change it if we learn new information, because, again, this is sort of an extra complementary layer to the data dictionary itself. So after we've added those tags, we submit it to Rob Larson and his group. We do a nice little post on Confluence. They put it on their next available agenda that they can get it in. And they talk through it if they have any questions, or they approve it. And then, like I said, it's an incremental approval, so it's a may, not a must. So it's if you want to use it. And the idea is that in that certification site, again, that I mentioned that Josh has built, you'll have more options in that dropdown besides just IDX. So you can see, like, what kind of fields could I use if I wanted to do this specific type of product. And the best practice process is relatively similar too, in that we get our use case submitted, and then at the same time we're doing that payload tagging, we're going to pull up that template and follow along and answer those questions and come up with those ideas. And we'll reach out to subject matter experts who are in that space and get some feedback from them as well, because they don't always attend the meetings, but we want to make sure we're getting their information in. And then we add that content and we submit it to the RESO staff. Where it goes from there, we're still working out, but again, we're hoping that becomes a nice way for anyone who's trying to understand how to better use RESO to get that content, or to be able to read that and learn, like, how can we do more with RESO standards. So those are our two processes, and then I'll turn it over to Catherine if she wants to talk a little bit about the overall organization.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you noticed at the top of a lot of Chris's slides and a lot of we literally bring up the worksheet and go over the rows. It is really getting it done. We're in at a very deep level, and you're kind of like these little pups, like implementation on the right side of this. Is that your right side? On the right side of this graph here, where it says implementation, at the top where it's RESO member organizations, this is just to give you sort of an overview of RESO and how it's structured so that we can come together to create these standards. So under the RESO member organizations, you have creation, asking, creating, researching ideas, and implementation up the other side. And everything in the center there that you see is literally all for naught if it's not implemented. We had on an earlier panel with Zenlist talking with the MLSs about how much was learned by them actually jumping in and doing something. I thought that was really amazing. So we have all these great examples of people. When you dive in, that's when your hands get dirty, you realize what's broken. So I really like here, we got broker advisory up here at the top, and that is literally interfacing with brokers and agents on the ground, day to day, doing work, what they face, what problems they have, because sometimes we don't know what to do or create until we know what problem exists, which is why we're gonna have pain points this afternoon. R&D, What can we imagine? So there's another great work group where you can bring your large ideas and they can consider it. And then in this middle section with data dictionary, where you have the standard, when Chris was talking about resources, he meant the data dictionary resource, because there are identified fields and lookups for everything. So this is a great treasure trove, and we together need to determine what those fields are in agreement. And so, like Al McElman was saying, the more you participate, the more likely what you want that field to be called is going to get in the data dictionary, and we're all going to have unison on it. So we've got event model, internet tracking, interoperability, our work group, which is every Tuesday, every second Tuesday of the month, 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. So just remember, today is a Tuesday. The second Tuesday of next month, you could be same time, same place. Yep. Okay, transport. This all comes down to transport, because that is how everything moves around, right? Like, how are we actually going to get the parts from A to B? And interoperability is that those parts don't get stuck, like they work and flow. And we don't know what parts are going to get stuck until we move forward through these worksheets and through user stories. So again, that's why it's so exciting with our group. Imagine any problem you have, no longer need to complain about it. You could actually go fill in the template on the Interoperability Workgroup site and submit it to us. And then we can talk about it and get through it here. So then it comes down to the board liaison committee, which generally Chris goes to, and the chairs of each of the groups attends, and then it goes to the board. So it's very democratic, and it's very broad-based and from the ground up. So this is a great system, and if we could get to the next slide. Okay, so that was really overview, but what we want to do is get really specific. So in the last work group that we had on September 10th, we got rid of the spreadsheet for a minute, and we just said, hey, where does offer management as a particular need touch your life, if at all? And at the end of these next few slides, we're going to be talking to you about this, so I want you to all start thinking just about how offer management in your own work life touches your life. And I see people in the audience who are part of that, so this is really great. So we thought in that work group, we would present this at the conference as an example of how something could be presented in a work group, and everyone could bring their ideas, and then we could bring it up at the conference. So these next few slides are us. We wanted to dream into outer space, but it's just amazing how when you see some of these things, just how much is actually broken that we need to fix versus, but let's dream a little here together. So let's go to the next slide. So all these next slides are actually people in the work group that mentioned this. So we transcribed what was suggested. So imagine if you could just seamlessly integrate offer management with the MLS so that when you're a busy agent booking tons of showings and dealing with clients, you're not going to show a property that already has an accepted offer on it, right? So seamlessly integrate with MLS systems to trigger real-time listing status updates when an offer is accepted, stopping showings instantly and notifying all parties involved. Right? Like when I say dream, doesn't it seem like that should already happen?
Well, and what's interesting, just to add on to that, is when we're writing up these best practice guides, like for this particular situation, we'd say, well, we think as part of the best practice, we need to recommend webhooks and events, because that will do this if you include that as part of your development of your product and you want to work towards interoperability. So we take the story and then we apply the standard to it. So.
Exactly. We map the RCP to the problem.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, here was another one that was brought up. Combine offer insights with listing views, showing analytics, mortgage pre-approvals, across the market entirely to help sellers, agents and sellers understand trends, pricing strategies, and competitive positioning. So this is a very broad one, but there were just all kinds of inspirations and foresight and insight that could come from a shared offer management system that was spread out to various users throughout the ecosystem and life of the offer.
And again, for this kind of data being passed back and forth between different systems, the RCP we said would be interesting here would be the common schema one, so 25.
Yeah.
Is that something that you could write, that you could use data dictionary fields, pass back and forth, but you don't have to have something structured like Web API is for MLS use right now?
Exactly. Okay, also, to enable a single unified platform for brokerages and agents to view, evaluate, and respond to all offers, where they manage their transactions, their marketing activities, and their production statistics. So this becomes really interesting because, could this happen in a unified platform where different companies and different products are actually part of it, but it, like was mentioned earlier, seems like it's one seamless, integrated product or service, especially for the end user, the consumer, who you just want to be a superstar for. So really, in the end, this is all helping the consumer have a seamless real estate experience through their interaction with organized real estate. Okay, connect with external vendors like lenders to automate the delivery of pre-approval letters and other necessary documentation, enhancing communication and efficiency in offer management. This just seemed like a no-brainer to kind of go to the next level and to be able to utilize offers to make this possible.
And that's where, again, coming back to the payload tagging, when we're doing that exercise, that is one of the things we think about is who's the audience that could be using this? And does that audience have familiarity with RESO? Mm-hmm. So that's why we want to pair not just the payload tagging in the spreadsheet, but with the story too, because then maybe a vendor like a lender who's coming in and maybe doesn't have as much familiarity with this side of the business, we give them that roadmap on how they can be more successful, how they can jump right in, how they can jumpstart what they're doing and how they're trying to implement their product.
Yeah, exactly, because these stories in the RCPs basically make it so you could literally have a connection between two parties who didn't know they had the solution for each other. Mm-hmm. Because in interoperability, we're trying to reach every stakeholder, basically other than consumers are the only people not represented here, but we're all representing them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're reaching all stakeholders, so bringing vendors and MLSs together and brokerages.
Yeah, it is interesting because obviously there's a lot of MLS talk, but a lot of our conversations actually spin outside of the MLS because interoperability isn't necessarily about MLS to other systems, it's more about those systems to each other. Yeah. So I do like that we get to bring in a lot of different voices and a lot of different viewpoints for that fact. So.
Precisely. Okay, now we recognize that some offer management systems already do that, but we were thinking in terms of automatically anonymizing offers to ensure unbiased evaluations, promoting fair housing compliance, and reducing potential discrimination. Where this already happens, if there were two offer management platforms working together, or different offers were in it, could they speak to one another or keep it anonymous within two different systems? Okay. This is the fun part. For everybody not fully engaged yet, or who's sitting there and maybe does or doesn't know the person beside them, this is where, if we're gonna just practice starting to do it, we thought, Chris and I are gonna do it up here. We're gonna ask ourselves something that we're most passionate about, and then we're gonna share it with each other. So you each take the person next to you or someone you wanna pick, get up and move your chair if you're not by anybody. And literally, I want you to think about something you're passionate about. That's not hard. It has nothing to do with work. Okay? Could be anything. And then, what are you working on? Right? Whatever it is. Whoever you're with, whatever association brought you here, what are you working on? And be able to tell the other person that. So we're all gonna take a few minutes to think about this. But when you come together with this one person, you're just gonna say who you are, the one thing you're passionate about, and what you're working on. And the third thing we want you to think about is what role does offer management, it says it, but offer management play in your work life? So maybe you have a role in your current company that you never deal with offers. Well, because it's part of the transaction and it affects consumers, if it doesn't, could it? Or what could you think about it? So we're gonna have questions after this. So if you all just take 2 minutes to do that with the person beside you, just introduce yourself, think about what you're passionate about, and tell them what you're working on, okay?
John doesn't want to talk to his person, I guess. He's running away.
It's time to get a coffee.
So number 2, just before you get started, like, this is a little bit of a warm-up for pain points. Oh, I already lost him.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead and get started. We'll bring you back.
Okay, okay.
Right now, I'm passionate about not traveling so much. Okay. Hopefully that was a nice little warm-up for the session that comes after break, which is pain points. Maybe you got a little bit of inspiration for pain points there. But let's wrap up the conversations and come back to the meeting here. I feel like you got louder trying to talk over me. So, what we're going to ask for here is we want to have a little bit of conversation. Is anyone brave enough to volunteer what they're working on? Because what we're hoping comes out of this is a couple of things. 1, warm you up for pain points, but 2, also give us things to talk about interoperability. So what are some of the use cases that we can start focus on for that payload tagging and the best practices guide? So if you're feeling shy, scan the QR code and you can fill out a form and send us an ideas there. But is anyone willing to share a little bit about what you talked about and maybe what could be next up on our list after we were wrapping up offer management? Or if you had other ideas for offer management, like Catherine said. So anyone want to raise their hands and share with the group? I can just call on someone too.
Oh, I know somebody is going to want to share.
Yeah.
It could be what you're passionate about. It could be what you're working on. It could be something for our group. There was a lot of conversation.
I can start calling on some of our members because I know they have opinions in our workgroup meetings. Staring one down right now. Maybe she's got something she wants to get started. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Nice.
Consumer.
Excellent. So you could relate to what we came up, one of the real-time notification. Absolutely. Excellent.
So just to repeat that, Tim from Final Offer, did I get that right? Was saying to continue to think about the consumer as part of that audience when we're filling these out, and mention things like texting, real-time changes to the offer status. So that's definitely an interesting use case where we've talked about the webhooks before and event streaming, but can we tie that even with potentially an ad edit where we're updating that status automatically in a system? So definitely a great use case. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to share?
Otherwise,
is anyone new to RESO who hasn't shared?
Oh, we've got someone back there. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome.
A trestle share? Yeah. Yeah. Interoperability, bringing people together since 2018. What's better than that, right?
Can you repeat that? I didn't really hear
Yeah, so she was saying that they've been talking about a share and they just happen to be sitting next to each other and we happen to make them talk to each other and hopefully we got some good fruit out of that. So nothing for interoperability, but great for the two of you, so.
Well, they were talking about trestle sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good, that's good.
Any other ideas? Anything else? Because we're trying to give you a little bit of a flavor of what you would see in the workgroup meetings, and this is a big part of it. It's like we do just ask these questions of each other and then go back and forth and come up with the ideas. So, all right. Hopefully everyone had a chance, if you're feeling shy, to scan that QR code and send us some ideas.
What if we, has anyone got an issue or a problem they faced recently that doesn't have a resolution, like a story?
Something in the vein of that association management or offer management that we've already done,
Yep.
Another payload that you'd like to see. So, yes.
I think you talked about it already, the outdated agents and office data that comes from the analyst and it's not reliable.
I think that's an interesting one for us to talk through a little bit and see if there is something we can do in our work group. And what's great is, we'll take up things and occasionally we'll say, this isn't really us, it's really R&D or it's really transport, and we pass it along to them. That's why that graphic that Catherine went over is so important, because that can go up or down depending on what work group needs to work on it. So, well, I'll throw out a couple ideas because we did seed this ahead of time, just in case. So we talked with Josh Darnell, and he gave us a couple of thoughts that he thought would be interesting for us to take a look at. So we'll run it by the group here. One of them would be a broker back office payload tag That was something that had been talked about a few years ago and had some work done on it, but never got finished. So we've talked about that. We've also talked about that and maybe even a new one for like an MLS platform payload. Because there is a difference if you're using front end of choice and you have multiple MLS systems. There are things that you may not want to send in a brokerage back office feed to an MLS vendor, or to a brokerage back office feed because of its brokerage getting it. As an example, we've got save search and context as resources. And at first glance, you'd say, yeah, definitely put that in broker back office. That's going to help a lot of different things. But then you start thinking about who's getting that feed. And then you just realized you sent a bunch of brokerages contacts to each other, which is a big time problem, right? So there has to be almost like a different level for some of that thing that's more for an MLS use case, but not necessarily for a brokerage back office use case. So when we were talking about doing brokerage back office first, it sounded like maybe we also need to think about something specific for an MLS package as well, where some of those resources might go. That was 2 ideas that came out of there. And hopefully I remembered everything that Josh told me. If not, I'll get an angry text after this, I'm sure. But just to give you some thoughts about like where we're headed next, potentially with this group. So. Otherwise, last chance for feedback and to scan that QR code. Otherwise, info@reso.org if you have just general questions. You can obviously reach out to myself or to Catharine at any time. As Catharine already mentioned, our next meeting, I believe, is actually November 9th, but it's the second Tuesday of every month. So hopefully we can see you there and join our really solid group. Otherwise, we're going to give you a couple minutes back and you can go to break. We'll come back at 2:45 for pain points. So thank you very much for participating and hope to see you at the next work group meeting.